All right, everybody, welcome to the second training that we're going to go through in the Copywriting Mentorship Program, summer of 2016. This is the 10x Your Freelance Fees training. Now, I think that this title sounds a little bit hyperbolic, where you think, oh, wow, my prices are going to increase by 10 times after I look at this training. But in reality, it's actually a little bit underestimating what you can do after you learn the content that's in this module. And I don't want to overhype it, but the reality is I spent about $3,000 and about 8 to 12 weeks of my time with one of my copywriting mentors just to learn what I'm about to teach you now in this one module. So with that said, there's a lot to cover here, and the previous stuff that I learned, and for the past year and a half of me implementing it in my own business and learning my own stuff, the content you're about to see is not identical to what I learned. It's advanced. It's accelerated for that. There's some stuff you don't need. There's some stuff you do need, and it will pay to go over this stuff a lot to see if you get it, and to take a lot of notes and to ask a lot of questions, because one of the biggest things with this course is asking questions about your specific situation and anything that you're dealing with clients or your own business or anything like that. You need to start asking questions in Q&A that are specifically relevant to the content so you can better understand it. Otherwise, you're not going to get the same grasp and you're not going to get the same value from this. So with that said, we're going to dive into this training, and we actually might have to break it up into a couple different parts, but we're going to do the best that we can. And if you have any additional questions, make sure you take notes and come to the Q&A calls on Wednesday mornings. Without further ado, let's jump into the first part of 10x Your Freelance Fees, and that is mindset and foundation. So there are 6 components to mindset and foundation. The first part of mindset and foundation is your personal money ceiling and the fear of money. This is getting a little bit psychological. It's getting a little bit personal development, but in reality, especially when you are selling a service that has a flexible amount of value, as in you decide what your prices are, your clients decide how valuable it is for them in that moment, and there isn't some sort of government regulation on how much you're going to charge or how many you can sell or anything like that. When you have a flexible environment for your prices, the amount of money you can make is limited only to your personal fear or acceptance of money. And when I say that, I am not a woo-woo person. I'm not someone who goes to the Tony Robbins seminars and reads every book that comes out from T. Harv Eker, anything like that. I am someone who's very pragmatic. And so when I do the training that I do, and when I talk to my clients, I frame my prices in very pragmatic ways. Yet I am still able to get $5,000, $10,000, $15,000, or even more to write copy for people who've never met me before and may or may not even know anything about me when we're talking. So one of the ways I do that is by reframing the ceiling for what I view as valuable for copy. And there's a couple of ways that I can do that. The first way is when I'm reframing my own money ceiling, it helps me to understand what other people have charged for either the same service or a very similar service to what I'm offering. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to charge as much or even as little as they are charging, but it helps to frame it in my mind and go, oh, okay, so those are what some other people believe their service is worth. And then I make a judgment based on, do I feel that I provide a better service? Do I feel that I could provide a faster service, a more in-depth service? Is my stuff better than theirs? Plain and simple. And if I feel like it's better than theirs, it's probably worth more than theirs. So that's one very pragmatic way to look at your money ceiling and think, okay, how much am I believing my stuff is worth? So we're talking about the positive side of things right here, not the negative side of things. So we'll go to the negative side and the fear of money in a little bit. But right now we're focusing on the positive side. What can I do to be more valuable? What can I do to feel more valuable as a freelancer, to feel more valuable as a copywriter? Because those questions how you feel, where your confidence is, what you think you can provide to the client in terms of value are extremely important in how you position your price. So when I look at the value of my copy, I see things like I can increase the person's sales by 100%, 200%, 1000% or more. And I think, wow, that's incredibly valuable. Now it comes down to how valuable is that to me to be able to do that for a client, and how valuable is that to a client to be able to do for them. A rule of thumb that I typically do is if I can agree with a specific number that myself and the client believe is reasonable for the project, I will take 10% of that perceived amount or that agreed upon amount. So if a client looks at me and goes, well, I'm planning on doing $300,000 from this launch, then reasonably for me, a fee would be $30,000. If a person is looking at doing $1 million from the launch, then reasonably for me, that would be $100,000. So that 10% rule kind of gives me a frame with which to work with. And if the client and I both agree that there's going to be a significant amount of benefit from this copy, then we can start talking towards what the true value of that copy is, and not necessarily what they believe the going rate should be, what my hourly rate is, which we'll talk about in a little bit. The concept is you're talking about value and you're talking about what you can bring to the table for that client rather than your personal feelings on what the price should be and what your client's personal feelings on what the price should be. When stuff like this is elastic, you push it, you push the boundaries based on your own belief in yourself and your own ability to convince your client. So that's the positive side of things, guys. There's a lot of stuff you can do to improve your confidence when you're selling something, whether that's by looking at proof before you go on to a sales call, like, I did this for this client, I'm a good copywriter. Whether it's something like you psych yourself up, you use positive affirmations in the morning or in the evening or before you go on to a sales call. Or maybe it's just journaling for you, talking through your thoughts, making sure that you understand why you believe certain things. It's all personal, and I'm not going to give you a specific rule on how to do it, but understand and start to think, what are my money ceilings? What are the things that I believe are too high? Like if I heard a price and somebody said, yeah, I charged him $50,000 for that sales package, and you went, wow, how could you possibly charge that much for copy? What are the thoughts that come through your mind? This is what we're going to talk about in a sec with the fear of money. What are the thoughts that come through your mind when somebody says I charged $50,000 for a package, or when I say I charged $15,000 or $20,000 for a sales letter or VSL? What are those thoughts? Because if they're negative, or if they are disempowering to you and they say, wow, no one would ever pay that, or I could never get that amount of money, or my clients just don't pay that kind of money, or my industry just doesn't pay that kind of money, whatever your specific story is going to start to factor into your fear of money. Because the reality is, if somebody has done it before you, then there is absolutely no excuse whatsoever that you cannot do it. So if you're looking at increasing your prices in a specific industry, or increasing your prices as a freelance copywriter in general, and you work with multiple types of clients, then you need to realize that there are freelancers out there that command prices of $100,000 or more for their packages. And it's not because of some secret that they have. It's not some template that they created or some formula or anything like that. What it boils down to is their reputation beforehand and the confidence they have in asking for that amount of money. Because here's the reality. A freelancer or someone who's writing copy or performing a service for someone has absolutely no guarantee of results for that client that they are putting on to their payroll. The reason being, you can't guarantee future results, but you can show past results. You can show confidence. And those are the only two things that really matter. Confidence being the one that matters the most. So confidence is something that I can harp on all day long, but when you're thinking to yourself, what should I charge? A lot of the time you think about it from a place of scarcity. You think about it from the context of, what is my client willing to pay? what do I think I can get for this? Maybe I need to really pay the bills, and I'm afraid the client is going to disappear, and I don't have any other clients to talk to. There's all of these different scarcity questions that come up when you're dealing with the fear of money that limit your ability to charge what your fees are worth. And the only reason you should not be charging high fees is if you are not a good copywriter. And if you know for a fact that you cannot deliver results. So when you think about that and you think, okay, what is my skill level? What am I able to do? Then if you think about it from a pragmatic standpoint and not a douchey, I am the best and I'm going to get whatever I can from this client type mentality, then be pragmatic with yourself and understand, okay, I don't have the most experience with a long form direct mail sales letter, which means that if I get a client who wants me to write a long form direct mail sales letter, I've never done it before. I'm not exactly sure how it's supposed to work, but I'm willing to look, I'm willing to research, and I'm willing to use the skill that I have in other areas to work on this project. And if the sales letter is worth $500,000 to my client once it's completed, and if it's converting at a certain reasonable percentage, it could be 1% to cold traffic, could be 10% to warm traffic, whatever it happens to be, whatever that reasonable percentage is. If you think, okay, well, I have a reasonable chance of hitting that number, then you start looking at your value from that context, not from the context of what is my client willing to pay, what am I willing to charge, what do I need to get right now to pay my bills, all that kind of stuff. Think about it in terms of a value exchange where you are the one exchanging the most value in the transaction. We're going to go over what that means specifically later in this training, but remember that you as a copywriter are the value provider in this relationship. You are not the value taker. They are getting money at a discount when they pay you because you are specifically creating money and value and sales in their business. If they pay you money, then you are going to make them exponentially more money than they pay you. And that is how a copywriter works. So that's the mentality you need to start having, and we'll talk about that a little bit later in this training. But with money ceilings, fear of money, understand positively what you think is possible and understand what negative ideas are dragging you down. And it's going to take some introspection. What I would recommend if you're struggling with this module already, I don't think I can charge that. My clients won't take that. This industry won't take that. Copywriters are getting paid less. I've never been able to charge more than this amount. How can people do that? All of these thoughts that are floating through your mind, start journaling. Grab a journal, grab a piece of paper, grab a pen, and start journaling. Pause the video, start journaling. Talk to yourself. Try and figure out what those statements are that are going through your head and immediately root them out. Because if you start repeating those things in your head during this training and as your career as a freelancer, you will never hit the goals that you want because you're going to let those questions that don't really have good answers or have the wrong answers hold you down. And it happens to people for years, sometimes even decades, because they refuse to acknowledge that they might be telling themselves the wrong thing when it comes to money. All right, we're going to dive into a little bit more specific stuff here. The time versus value argument. So time versus value. A lot of things you're going to encounter as a freelancer, as a copywriter, is people are going to ask, how much do you charge for this? How much do you charge for that? What do you have your rate card? Do you have your rate sheet? What is your hourly? What do you charge for this? What do you charge per hour? What do you charge to work on these sort of things? And then you start getting into questions like, oh gosh, I just need another email. It's not going to take you more than 5 or 10 minutes. Why can't you just add that into the price? And people start to nickel and dime. The reason this happens, the reason every single one of those conversations happen with a client is because you've already rooted your value in time rather than your value in pure value. If somebody is treating you like an employee, then you've rooted yourself in time. They believe that they need to get the most value for the amount of time that they've paid for your services. Now, if they purchased a sales letter from you and you said, well, my rate is $100 an hour and it usually takes me 8 hours to write a VSL, which means it's $800 up front, then you need to understand that you did that to yourself. And every single time you charge based on time, you are ruining your ability to become successful as a freelancer, because at the end of the day, it's impossible for a freelancer to be completely booked 40 hours a day or 40 hours a week with their maximum hourly rate and still manage to run their business, do all the finance, do all the marketing, do all the sales calls, all the non-billable hours, because it's impossible for you to make that happen on a time scale. You would need to charge something like $500 to $1,000 an hour just to make six figures because of the time it takes to run a freelance business on top of doing billable work. So the solution to that is to never charge based on time. Never let the client believe that you are charging him because you believe it should take a certain amount of time to complete his project. As a copywriter, you have the ability and you have the right to charge based on value of the service delivered, which means when you are completing a project, whether or not it's an email series or it's a full launch package, your value is related to the amount of money or leads that that client is going to get from your work. I've had clients that paid me $12,000 a month, and I was not writing sales copy for them to convert copy. I was writing lead generation copy because every email they got into their system was worth $28. So if I got 1,000 emails into their system, it was worth $28,000. And if you can do that in a week, all of a sudden $12,000 a month doesn't seem very high. When their lifetime value was $115 per email versus $28 per email, then all of a sudden you start getting into very different value arguments than time arguments. It might take me 15 to 20 minutes to write an email. It might take me 2 hours. The time is irrelevant. The value is what matters. And that is true of every single service you provide. So when you're having the conversation with your client and they ask you, what is your hourly rate? Then one of the things one of my mentors said to me, which I really appreciate, was if a client ever asks you what your hourly rate is, you can say, well, that's a great question. I do have an hourly rate. However, most of my clients seem to think that, or most of my clients feel better suited to simply pay by the project, because if we pay by the hour, it becomes much more expensive to work with me rather than paying by the project. And that's what he says if somebody asks what the hour is. Because then you can frame it as, well, my hourly rate is $1,000 an hour, but I bill for research, and I bill for outlining, and I bill for drafts, and I bill for contemplation time, and I bill for everything that I else need. So I could send you a bill for 20 to 30 hours of work in the first week, and that'll cost $20,000 to $30,000. Or we can talk about the project, the scope of the project, and agree upon a valuable price for both of us that we can charge for the project. That type of frame is really powerful if you have to talk to someone who insists on asking you what your hourly rate is. But most of the time, I've never actually had to use that line on a client, because if somebody is asking me what my hourly rate is, I say I do not charge by the hour. I charge by the project. And what we need to figure out is the scope of the project and the value of the project in this conversation. So a big part of that is we'll come to that and how you kind of frame that discussion, how you frame the discussion around value, how you make it cooperative, and how you make it specific to what the client needs rather than what the client says they need. We can talk about that, or we will talk about that at a later time. But right now, there is a difference between charging for your time and charging for your value. Now, don't cop out and say, well, my hourly rate's $100, and I think it's going to take me $800 to write this VSL, so I'm just going to charge $800. That's not the right answer. All right, just charging by the project and then doing your calculations based on time is not the right answer, because when you do that, you're automatically setting yourself up for failure, because you're not factoring in, most people are terrible at estimating their time, but you're not factoring in things like how much time it's going to take you to research, how much time it's going to take you to actually write the draft and write the final draft and go back and tweak and find other things. Maybe something comes up with your family. Maybe something comes up with another client that you have to handle. Time is a terrible way to measure your value. And that's the thing that I want to impress most in this training, is to stop measuring your value on time and start measuring it on the mutual benefit that you can give to the client and what is beneficial for you as a freelancer or as a copywriter or as a business owner based on your goals for your business. You're not in this because you just need to work 40 hours a week. You're in this because you want that freedom and you want that ability to control your lifestyle. And if you're trying to do it by charging for your time, you're automatically failing. Charge by value, do not charge by time. And if you have questions on this, come to one of the Q&A calls and ask, and I'll talk about your specific situation. All right, let's talk about the next part. Cooperative versus adversarial relationships. Now, this is going to get into a little bit of theory and a little bit of stuff that other freelancers might not agree with, because here's the thing. Most client relationships or most business relationships in general are automatically assumed to be adversarial. They're assumed to be what's called a zero-sum game, which means somebody's got to lose and somebody's got to win. And most businesses approach every contract and every deal that they create like that. So they're the ones who want to win. They want to get the most value for the least amount of money. They want to spend the least amount of money for the most amount of project completion. They're talking about hourly rates. They're comparing and contrasting people back and forth. They're not looking at value. They're looking at it as an expense. And they're looking at you as an expense. And on top of that, they're looking to get as much out of you as possible in order to further their own goals. Probably, because maybe they've had a bad freelancer experience in the past, maybe they've just heard about it in the past. Whatever the reason is irrelevant. If they come to the table adversarial, which most of them will, and they're trying to get the best for them, it's your job as a freelancer to shift that conversation from being adversarial, as in a status quo type thing, like tit for tat, quid pro quo. Your job is to shift that into a cooperative relationship where both of you are working towards the same goal and getting a mutual benefit from the project. Your benefit as the freelancer is obviously getting paid for your work, getting paid for your value, and getting paid commensurate with your value. That's obvious. But your fee does not have to be an expense for this person. If you work cooperatively with the clients that you talk with or the prospects that you talk with, they're immediately going to see you as somebody very different from the other freelancers that they've dealt with. Most freelancers will give in. They'll say, okay, yep, this is my rate sheet. This is how much it's going to cost. Let's do this, sign the contract, boom. And that's not the right way to go, because the client then basically assumes that this is going to be an adversarial relationship and that you are going to try to get the most amount of value for the least amount of your time and the most amount of value from that client without doing the least amount of work. That's the assumption. And so they're going to try to get the most from your time, the most from their fees, and it's going to result in a bad relationship, plain and simple. When you shift the conversation to be cooperative, as in you shift it to be, this is the project we're working on together so that we can both benefit. You're going to benefit because you're going to have a project that is going to earn you X amount of money or get you X number of leads. And I'm going to benefit because I'm going to get to use my valuable service to help you in exchange for some money. And those types of conversations shift the focus, and they also shift the tone of the relationship. And you're going to find out that you have a lot better client relationships when you start going into things cooperatively. And you have to be sincere about it. It's not a gimmick. It's not something where you go, oh, I'm just going to convince them we're working together and then get the most amount of fee and run away. The reality is, if you act cooperatively, is if you act as if this is now your project that you're working on and you do your best for that client, then they're going to love you, they're going to refer you to people, and they're going to be more than happy to work with you again. I have several clients where the first few questions that I ask are, what's the goal for this project? Why is that important to you? What can we do to make this project even better? And what are some of the ways that we can work together to do that? Those questions change the tone from a freelancer relationship to a partner relationship, and that is where you want to be. So, like I said, a little bit philosophical, but every conversation you have with a prospect, try to shift it from being adversarial to being cooperative as quickly as possible by asking those mutually beneficial questions. like I talked about, mutual benefit. I won't dig too deep into this one, but mutual beneficial relationships are key to being a valuable freelancer or a valuable copywriter, because you understand that your service has immense value to the end client. And the reason for that is because good copy makes them money. It does not waste money. It is not an expense. They are buying money at a discount if they hire a good copywriter. Good copywriters make you money. They don't cost you money. However, bad copywriters cost you more than money. That's a line you can use if you want to talk to a client about it, but here's what that means. Good copywriters make you money, which means the amount of money you spend on a fee to hire a copywriter is going to be returned back to you by an order of magnitude, because they're going to write the copy that drives your sales forward, and you're hiring someone to help you do that to the greatest extent possible. So the better a copywriter you can hire, the more valuable a copywriter you can hire, the more money you are going to make. However, if you hire a bad copywriter, then it's going to cost you more than money. Because on the good side of things, if you hire a bad copywriter, then all they're going to do is not really provide the amount of value that you paid for. And they're going to take too long. They're not going to deliver good copy. You might not even get to use the copy that they deliver because they're bad and you don't want to send it to your clients. But if they're really bad and you use the copy that they're sending to you, and it costs you sales, and it costs you reputation, and it costs your company's brand, then they are damaging you in ways that you cannot recoup. Even if you got a full refund from that copywriter, you could not recoup the damage that they caused by hiring, but that you caused for yourself by hiring a bad copywriter. So you come to this impasse where if you're not willing to hire a good copywriter and pay the fees that are commensurate with a good copywriter, then you have to be willing to risk not just money with a bad copywriter, but also your brand and your reputation and your future sales and your lifetime value of your customers. That's the conversation that you need to have with your prospects as a copywriter, because they do not think that. They view copywriting as an expense that needs to happen, similar to paying web hosting or to paying for goods or services. They view it as an expense. They don't think about the ramifications of hiring a bad copywriter. And when you have that conversation with them, it's going to open their mind and it's going to scare them a little bit. But on top of that, they're going to think, wow, okay, well, this guy just informed me of that. Clearly, he's a good copywriter. That's the type of conversation you want to have. So you can also use the line, and this is one that I have used in the past. A copywriter is not an expense unless you're already planning to fail at this project. A copywriter is not an expense unless you're already planning to fail at this project. Because if you implement good copy, 9 times out of 10, that copy is going to make money. As long as it's good copy. If it's bad copy, then there's nothing you can do about that. But except not hire the bad copywriter. But if you implement good copy, then even if you don't implement very well, then you should still be making a lot more money than what you paid that copywriter. Because the copywriter should not be charging you a ton of money unless he knows he can make you even more money. That's the line that I use when I'm talking with clients, and it certainly works. One last thing about mindset and foundation and these different things that we talked about, like money ceilings, fear of money, time versus value, cooperative versus adversarial relationships, and on and on. One of the most valuable skills you can cultivate as a copywriter is not the ability to research heavily, or it's not the ability to close clients with some new tactics on the phone. One of the single most valuable skills you can cultivate as a copywriter is certainty. Certainty in yourself, certainty in your ability to provide value, And this comes from pragmatism. This comes from understanding yourself. This comes from being honest with yourself and saying, I'm not that good at long form, but I'm great at emails. Or I'm not that good at VSLs, but I'm really good at direct mail. It's coming from that place of certainty and understanding and self-awareness that you can then pass on to your client. When your client hires you, or when they're thinking about hiring you, they're at one of the most uncertain times in their business career because they're about to risk hiring someone to help them with a very critical part of their business, which is copywriting. And they must trust not only you, but themselves. Because if they can't trust their own decisions and they can't trust you as a service provider, they're not going to buy, or they're going to be very, very angry with their purchase once they buy. So if you personally, as the writer, cultivate that level of certainty in your own skill and that level of certainty in your ability to perform from your clients, they're going to hear that and they're going to feel that in your conversations. And that is going to be a huge benefit to you when you're talking. Because if somebody comes to you, the way that I'll talk about in a bit, and actually discusses the prospect of hiring you to write their copy, then your certainty is going to close the vast majority of those people. If you are uncertain, you're going to see a lot of them float away. Right now, if somebody reaches out to me to write copy, 9 times out of 10, I will close that person as a client. That is an unheard of closing ratio. But the reason for that is because they reached out to me, which means I have a position of authority. And I've cultivated that over the last few years doing certain things. But on top of that, I am very certain when I speak with them. If I can't help them, I will tell them that. If I'm not right for the project, I will tell them that, because I either don't have experience in their specific niche, or I don't feel confident in what they're trying to accomplish. If it's some sort of newfangled marketing thing that I don't really understand very well, that's fine. But I need to have that level of certainty in myself in order to have those conversations. And when they do come to me with a project that works, I'm very certain and I close them 9 times out of 10. So that is the first section of 10x your fees as a freelancer. Let's go back through and go through the components real quick. Mindset and foundation, the first part is your money ceiling and your fear of money. Positively speaking, try to understand where your ceiling is. Like, what do you think is possible? And negatively speaking, what are your fears around money? What are your fears around charging a certain amount? And why do they exist? Talk about themselves. Talk about it with yourself, with your spouse, with your significant other, with your friends, whomever. Journal it out. Figure those things out. Do that little piece of homework. Talk to your fellow membership or mentee members and try and figure it out. Because a lot of people don't have that level of self-awareness and they need other people to help them. But do the work, do the journaling, do the talking, do whatever it takes for you to figure out what those are, both positively, trying to find out where your limits are, and negatively, trying to find out what your blocks are. Time versus value. This is very simple, but a lot of people mess it up. Do not charge for your time in any way, shape, or form. Do not charge for your time in any way, shape, or form. Only charge based on value. The value that you can bring to that client and to that project. That's what you charge for. That's how you gauge your prices. Cooperative versus adversarial relationships. As best you can and as quickly as you can, change the conversation from adversarial to a cooperative conversation. Change it from what are your fees, how much are you going to charge, when can you get this done, how much time are you going to devote to it, to how can we make this project a success together for both of us. Mutual benefit. Always focus on the mutual benefit. Always focus on the end goal for your client, not your fees. Your fees are a gateway to getting the end goal. They are not an expense and they are not the end point for you. They're simply a gate. They're simply something where you're talking with your client and you say, okay, great, this is the outcome you want. So let's get this outcome together. The investment is this. That's the conversation you want to have. Good copy makes you money as the client line you can use, and bad copy costs you more than money. Good copy makes you money, and bad copy costs you more than money. And the level of certainty that you have in yourself to perform at a certain level or not perform certain projects. That's the first part, mindset and foundation of the 10x Your Fees freelancing course. So there are 5 sections in total, guys. Number 2 is called the sales conversation. Number 3 is called objection handling. And number 4 is called before the call. And number 5 is called after the call. So we're going to go through all of these in detail, but this is the content for the main section. And I want you guys to get this, take notes on it, bring questions to the Q&A on Wednesdays, and let me know what you need help with in this content.